With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Welcome to another episode of Into the Fray. If you're new here, I hope you're enjoying it enough to head to your podcatcher of choice to rate and review the show. This helps it aggregate across the listening platforms, which will turn into more people willing to come on and share their encounters. If you've been listening for years, I'd ask that you please do the same. Home base for Into the Fray is intothefrayradio.com. There you will find all episodes, blog posts, and get bonus content info. Speaking of that bonus content, on top of the free weekly show, I also produce bonus content for Patreon and Apple Podcast Premium. On either platform, you get all bonus audio episodes and early releases, each one ad-free, of course. Full disclosure though, Patreon has a bit more in the way of perks because of their interface. Over there, you will get video versions of patron-only chats, the private Discord channel, and merch at certain pledge levels. So head to patreon.com/intothefray or your Apple Podcatcher app to sign up for bonus content today. You can find me on the big three social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Linktree link in each of my bios will take you to all the places you want to venture regarding ITF, including Small Town Monsters documentaries, various ways to listen to the show, Beyond the Fray books, contact info for me, and more. And lastly, and really honestly most importantly, if you'd like to share your encounter or encounters on Into the Fray, the best way to get in touch is by emailing me at shannon@intothefrayradio.com. And without further ado, let's get to the interview. On this edition of Into the Fray, I welcome Fred Andersson. He is the author of the quite recently released book, Northern Lights: High Strangeness in Sweden, and I'm so excited to finally be talking to him. We were supposed to talk earlier, but there were some hijinks that we think might be attributed to some entity somewhere. Who knows what happened there, but now finally it is happening. It is on. Fred, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm happy to finally be here. As you hinted last time, I was stuck on a train and I couldn't reach home in time. And can you believe it? Today, all trains has been, the all trains was canceled basically, except one train. So I was very, very lucky to get home in time to sit here with you. So there's something fishy with those trains, or whatever it is,
Yeah, and we don't want to give away too much, but Fred was telling me the story about how he had to muscle in through the doors and punch a few people, little MMA style, just to get on that very last train that was running to make it home, to hop on the computer and do this interview. So, Fred, I'm really proud of you. Thank you for doing that.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
They tried again, but they couldn't snag us this time. Well, I've of course, read the book, have it in my possession, and I've chosen just a few things out of the book to cover because there is a whole lot out of Sweden. And I would like to really just open up the conversation with, hey, I would imagine most of my listeners are probably in the United States and they're not very familiar with Swedish culture. Do you guys over there embrace this kind of stuff? How, like here in Falk, Arkansas, there's a whole museum and restaurants and, things in Point Pleasant, things like that they embrace the local monsters. Not everybody does, or going out to a Roswell or an Area 51 Rachel area out here. What goes on over in Sweden as far as high strangeness goes? Is there any embracing that goes on, or is it really quite taboo to talk about?
I wouldn't say it's taboo, but I mean, to be fair, Sweden has, for some reason, been known as a very secular, rational country where you don't do weird things, even if Sweden by itself is weird. Of course, I can say so, but I was actually whining to a friend the other day about this because we have tons of lake monsters, for example. We have stuff happening, but there's only one town in Sweden, Östersund, who embraces their lake monster. They have some statues or sculptures. You can go out and look for the monster at the edge of the lake on certain spots. They have a part of it at a local museum, etc., etc. But it's very, very rare that these kind of things get embraced by here in Sweden, which is a pity. I think I recently I actually think that it's because people have a tendency to kind of forget about these things. They really don't want to touch the weirdness. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I was at a meeting with a town in Sweden because in 1974 they had a big UFO flap, a pretty sensational one. There's a chapter about it in the book actually, and so we had a meeting with them and to do some kind of exhibition, or maybe have a talk or invite some guests or something to kind of, like you said, embrace this event from 1974, which was huge at the time. And I mean, first of all, they looked at us like we were tinfoil hats when when we came into this boardroom, and we asked them, "Do you know anything about this UFO flap in 1974?" And they're like, "Yeah, we heard about it." So we showed them clips, we showed them newspaper clippings, we showed them a ton of material. So hopefully this will lead to them having maybe just a one-day event about this thing, or maybe even some kind of exhibition that goes on for a couple of weeks in March next year, which I really hope. And I hope that can kind of lead to other towns to do the same thing, to just embrace that monster someone saw in the 80s, or that UFO in the 90s, or whatever, because there's a lot of it out there.
There is, and I think that, as you say, maybe it has this hold 1 year, and then the locals are going, well, hey, that brought in 1,000 people. Then the next year it could be 2,000 people. I mean, it could
Yeah.
really be good. At least bringing the money in. Just look at it from that standpoint.
Yeah, and it's something that's out of the ordinary. I mean, it will generate attention, without a doubt, because stuff like this doesn't happen in Sweden. These kind of events, it will, this town, which is a nice town, but you rarely hear about it. Of course, it's just me who talks about it every time I talk about this UFO flap. So I want to help them to be seen more, and to kind of make people realize that if you're curious, you will discover so many wonderful, weird, strange things. You can even find them in your own hometown, or it's because, like I said, there's so much weirdness out there, and and people don't want to touch it. So we want to kind of remove the stigma, you can say, from these things.
Now, how did your curiosity in all of this start, Fred?
Well, that's something I've been thinking about a lot. I think it's actually a lot of different things that kind of merge into the Fred you see today. I mean, I was raised in a pretty, quite religious community in a very old part of Sweden. We even had our own castle out there, and castle garden, and even a labyrinth that was overgrown. So it was a magical spot. So I to be honest, I don't count myself as a really religious person, but to be there at the time, and I kind of got a taste for the weird stuff happening there. I mean, the castle itself had, of course, several ghosts. I might have seen one of them. There was rumors about, of course, a spot of blood that you couldn't wash it away. It was there forever, basically. There were, and also the spirituality itself in this community, which felt very, I don't know if I mean, it felt quite uh, American in style, compared to other parts of Sweden and other churches and religious communities. So it had a very outgoing, very, people were speaking in tongues, there were healings, there was things like that. And that kind of just, it triggered my imagination a lot. And sometime during this phase of my life, my mother gave me a book, a Swedish book, a quite skeptical book on UFOs, and I loved it. I mean, I still have it, on the bookshelf above me, and that one, in combined with this community, with being raised the way I did, kind of, it sent me off into this beautiful life, basically. A roller coaster life, I would say. But that's kind of where it started. And then years later, I got a gig doing a paranormal show where I was a segment producer. So I was out in, I think, 50 or 60 haunted homes, interviewing families and other witnesses to these strange things happening. And I remember clearly during that time, during those years, that I started to understand that when you hear people, when you listen to people, you just, you doesn't read it or you see it on television, you sit there with them at their kitchen table, and they talk about their experience and how it affected them. Then I started to understand that something is really, really going on. Before that, I was just interested, but after that, I kind of understood that, okay, there's more to this than I first thought.
Now, what's going on with that castle now? Is there still some kind of a community there? Is it used for anything?
Well, the area was sold first to a crazy German guy who had Dobermans running around the whole area, scaring people away. There was even a murder in the area.
Oh,
This was after the religious community left. But the German guy sold it to a Swedish company who have now restored the area to its full glory, and it looks beautiful. And the castle is there, of course, and they have paranormal investigations from time to time, and it's a great place. It's probably one of the more active haunted castles in Sweden. I was working for a paranormal show for a couple of years, and I told them every year that we need to go to Vengarn. That's the name of the castle, because it's a good haunted place. It's interesting. There's always something happening. But they were like, no, it's in Sweden. It's just a normal castle. They want something more spectacular, something more. I don't know. So they never went there. But the paranormal investigators who worked on the show later went to the castle and had probably the scariest night of their career. They captured some really, really interesting things, some really interesting sounds. They could hear heavy furniture moving, for example, on the floor above them in this empty castle, which I saw and heard that recording, and I was like blown away. That is impossible. People have seen, apparitions, do you say that apparitions maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, several of them. There's you can often hear, children laughing and such. Personally, when I was a kid and I was outside the castle, I saw a male figure, you can say, like a shadow person. I don't know how to describe it better, who was standing on the road leading away from the castle, and I could see him. I think it was a him, kind of fading away. So at the time, as a kid, I thought maybe, okay, it's some kind of mirage or something like this. But then you have to remember, I was living in a very religious community, so we really were supposed to be interested in ghosts. We had to find some other explanation, you can say. So it's a good spot. If you ever come to Sweden, Shannon, we will go there. You will love it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't hate on it because it just isn't as grand as the Disney castle, for instance. I mean, so they got the classic "I told you so." Like people were saying, you need to go to this castle, but they were like, it's not that impressive. Turns out, it's very impressive. You got to get the adult diaper out. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to. I mean, I think the issue with this castle was that I personally think it looks quite spooky, but it didn't look spooky enough. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's an old castle. It's a beautiful castle, but it looked quite traditional. When you look at the Swedish castles, but it's kind of, you need to look beyond that sometime. I mean, the area have an amazing story in general. It had very, traumatic years in modern times with a murder, for example, or a lot of drama happening. So there's a lot of that vibe in the castle and around the castle. Yeah, but I'm happy it getting the attention it always deserved.
Yes, I have a slightly less lustrous castle here in Las Vegas called the Excalibur, which locals kind of tend to know to stay away from. It's like staying at the Circus. But hey, I'm probably a little jaded because I grew up here. So there you go. So to me, the point of that was any castle, I think to me would be pretty fantastic to visit. In preparation for our talk, because the first thing that I sent along that I would like to cover had to do with underground stuff, subterranean strangeness. And so I think it was the Horror Weekly account on Facebook. I came across a little funny picture that they posted with a little, a meme essentially. There was a one-liner at the top, and the one-liner was just a great group of folks having the time of their lives, not a cell phone in sight. And the picture is of all the women on the porch of the little cabin in the descent before they make their final descent. The doing the woohoo picture. So I thought, that is a perfect segue into my talk with Fred. So that's on my stories right now because plus I love the descent, but I love anything subterranean because it terrifies me. And you just really kind of go, you just don't know what's down there. I mean, it's just like going deep in the ocean. I mean, there's got to be things down there we are not meant to be messing around with. So yeah, that is the first thing I chose. It's just underground goodness from your book.
Yeah. Well, I'm of course I'm fascinated by the underground. My mother actually lived in a old mining community, and everywhere, if you go out in the nature, in the forest, there's big holes, and you really have to beware so you don't fall into them. Of course, they put a fence around some of them, but these are old fences. These are hard to see basically, but they're so deep and they're so scary. My father actually told me, this was like maybe 15 years ago, he told me that we had a relative who accidentally fell into one of these mine holes, these holes, and died. uh, so so it's the idea of mines and caves, but especially mines in Sweden, is kind of full of mostly hauntings or stories about hauntings, or some kind of more supernatural creatures. I'd say that the most famous one we have is the mine wife, or the gruvfrun, which is a lady being who kind of takes care of the mines. And I'm sure Sweden isn't the only country who has this kind of character, but you need to beware of her. You need to keep the mine in order to, to not die down there or get hurt, basically. You need to clean up after yourself. So that's, I would say, is our most widely spread story, and you'll find that story in all mines here in this country. We also have a long tradition, of course, about gnomes and vettar, which is a kind of a gnome or an elf, and trolls, who many of those are living inside mountains, in caves, or under rocks, or in mines. And these are stories, these are a mythology that's spread all over Sweden, and you can find these even today. You can meet people who claims that they have met these characters, these critters running around. Uh, I'd say that the least seen one nowadays is the troll. I mean, have you seen Troll Hunter, the Norwegian movie?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's those kind of trolls. I found a woman who claimed to have seen 3 of these trolls in the 80s. She was quite young, maybe 9 or 10 years, and she could see these 3 giants, hulking, ugly giants, or maybe more the silhouettes of them, walking along a dust road somewhere in the forest. These, of course, could kind of be seen as some kind of Bigfoot creatures also, actually. So the troll and Bigfoot stories in Sweden are often very similar, because they're kind of describing the same thing: something very large, hairy, and smelly. So this is this is very, very interesting stuff. Do you want me to talk about the main mine story in the book?
Yes, please. That would be
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, that's a good one. I remember I read about this story in some less serious Swedish book about UFOs, and the story itself was so fascinating, so weird. So I actually decided to see if I could find any of the witnesses that was in this one. So I called up Tommy, who's kind of the main witness who have told this story, and talked with him. And I think this might have been the first time he talked about it in like 20 or 30 years, and he managed to sort out some things in it. And to my surprise, considering that the story is quite bizarre, he told me a very low key version of it, a very grounded version. He felt that it was weird, but he didn't, he didn't want to sell it. And the story goes like this. I think it was in 1969. All these years, I'm going to try to remember them. And he and his friends were out in Smedjebacken. They lived in Smedjebacken, who is a small community slightly up north. And they were building some kind of hut out in the forest near the old mine area. And they were probably playing cowboys and Indians or something like that. And they were having a lot of fun. And suddenly they peeked out from the hut and noticed that by one of the entrances to the mine, which basically is a deep hole, a very, very deep hole, they saw 2 large beings, 2 humanoids, you can say, with some kind of white clothes on, or something white on. They also had something on their face. They kind of looked like big black eyes, you know. I remember one drawing of this case, and they looked kind of much like owls in the face, the same kind of shape of the heads. And these guys, they were like 2.5 meters tall, so they were huge, and they were each carrying a suitcase, which is like, okay, what's happening here? Uh, and these characters were looking at the boys, and the boys got so scared, understandably. So they start running around the trail over, in the direction of the community where they lived. And these two whitely dressed characters with big black eyes and their suitcases started to run after them, but they kind of floated a little bit off the ground. They were kind of in a different time zone, as he described to me. It's like they weren't in their reality somehow. It kind of reminded me of what one of the kids told in the Ariel school incident in '94. There was something with the loop in the movement of these characters, like there were, you can almost say, like there were a projection from some other realm or some other reality. And one of the boys drop his glasses and has to stop to get the glasses, and they were quite close to the beings by now, just maybe 2 meters or something like that. Managed to get the glasses and continue to run. And this set off a whole life of experiences for Tommy. He saw so many UFOs after this, often golden discs hovering above lakes and forests. And it stayed with him, this experience. It was a defining moment in his life. So it's one of those stories where I'm absolutely sure that he experienced something and his friends experienced something. It feels like that. And now I realized I called him Tommy. I mean Benny, of course. Benny, Tommy, Connie, it's very common names in Sweden. So for Benny, this unlocked something. And it's even, I talked with him now maybe like 2 years ago, and he was very, very nice to me and told the story and managed to, I mean, in the book I read earlier, they were like 3 meters tall. So he took that down to 2.5 meters at least. And he made them more, he was convinced that there were some kind of otherworldly beings. He was sure about it. But what kind of beings? I mean, was it something that could be living underground, or was it just some kind of visitors? No matter what kind of belief one have about these things, this happened. The question is, what happened? Who were they? I'm very fascinated by this story and what Benny told me and what they saw and felt. I've always, I'm rambling here, but when this happened to them, they felt fear. He felt fear. This was a very, very frightening experience. But fear can also be there's a beautiful thing, because you get this adrenaline rush, you get this idea of this feeling of getting out from something, and you have experienced it, and you're unique in this experience. So if I understood him right, this was a very, very in the long run, a very positive experience for him.
I love when seemingly from what we would go with a label for these things, when otherworldly beings are carrying something mundane like a suitcase, you're going, what in the actual heck fire is going on there?
Yeah, and I'd say that those suitcases for me is the really, big high strangeness part of it, because it's so odd, it's so absurd. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, let's say, yeah, I mean, let's say hypothetically that there were aliens. Why would they have suitcases? Or if they were trolls or some kind of mountain beings, why would they have suitcases? But they had, and they had big black eyes, and they were floating above ground, and was seemingly in a different kind of reality than the boys. So it's it's a yeah, I like those details. I remember I read a Bigfoot story, maybe from the 70s, where a woman, she saw a UFO, a flying saucer. She ended up inside the flying saucer, and inside she saw a Bigfoot laying on a sofa reading a newspaper. Yeah, you know, it's those details that makes high strangeness come alive.
Yeah, those are definitely the ones that make you go, well, what's I mean, you got to have somewhere to stow the souls, right, Fred? I mean, that's what's in the suitcase.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. uh, but then again, I mean, now I mean I can't refer to any specific cases now, but there is obviously a ton of cases, especially with humanoids and aliens or flying saucers, where the beings have boxes, some kind of box. And I mean, a suitcase is a form of a box. You know, it's a something, you can hold something in it. You know, you can have something in it. And in all these cases, the box itself is a mystery. It's rarely you understand why it's there, or what's the purpose with it. But it's there, and the alien is holding it or pointing at it or dancing around it. Like I heard one one guy told me quite recently that he was out in the forest together with a friend, and he saw, I think it was like 3 or 4 dwarf-like creatures with black hoods dancing around a black box. So even if we're not talking a typical box here, it's still, you know, it's suitcases. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's still a mystery, you know.
See, you come upon that scene in the woods, it is time to go real quick. You don't mess
Yeah,
with that. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, maybe. I mean, I, I would love to see it. You know, I'm not sure I would, I would get closer, but I would at least try to stay for a while. You know,
Yeah, as long as
I
you knew they couldn't sense you or see you, I think it'd be okay. But
mhm.
I mean, you may need a little therapy afterward, but that's okay, depending on how whatever they do in their little circle. But that's cool, to each their own. Now,
Oh yeah.
just really quickly, Fred, something that you brought up, and this is something that I've talked about heavily. It was something that, in fact, for my Anomicon talk, for Ryan's deal, I know you were a part of that too. This was covered really quite heavily. It was my theme basically, and that is the fact that certain people, and this goes right along with the story because Benny was the only one out of all these kids that have now essentially quote unquote unlocked something, right? And the theme for my talk
Mhm.
was women that they just all happen to be women that have very similar experiences, but essentially they each had their own unlocking experience. And it was like once they saw this or once they experienced that, then all of these other things were like, ooh, look at this person. Well, they can
Mhm.
interact with us or they can see us. So it all of a sudden becomes this moth to the flame situation. So this is in fact the case then with these boys, right? Like Benny was the only one that then goes on to have essentially years and years of experiences. Now, does this include beyond the UFOs outside? Does this also include activity inside his home?
It happened around his home. I remember he told me that he didn't mention, like some, ghosts or poltergeist activity or something, but these objects, these flying objects, were hovering above his roof, for example. I think that was the closest they got, at least what he told me. But it's one of those guys I would love to sit down and talk with for hours and hours. So someday I need to, visit his town and just let him show me the place, and we can talk about it more. But there's, in many instances of the cases I've been looking into, you have more, you can call it paranormal activity around the witnesses, or before and after, something smaller, more intimate. They might be attacked by an alien creature, but they still hear weird footsteps,
Right.
outside the window, or odd sounds, like ghosts, basically. But it's, I don't know if you agree, but I feel a lot of these things are connected.
Oh, I absolutely do. And that was going to be my next kind of point, was to ask your opinion on that, because then once you see a UFO and then you see a shadow person in your home, then, and then the next night you're floating through a wall from quote unquote
Hmm.
aliens, or there's, the classic, oh, there's an owl, but it's not an owl situation, which you brought up earlier too, right? So you're kind of going, well, how is it not connected?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the older I get and the more I read about this, I feel that's how it is. Of course, I can never be sure, but for me it feels like that. And after talking with so many witnesses, especially during the paranormal shows I've done, and I noticed how, yeah, they're talking about ghosts in front of the camera, but then they're starting talking about, UFOs or trolls or other weird things that's happening in and around their home. So I think there is a deep connection. And I think, like you mentioned, there is something, you need an experience to unlock this, and you will experience more. I often say that, oh, I never experienced anything, but I have. But to me, it's always been so surprising things, so I often react to them, weeks or months or sometimes years after. And then I feel that, that was quite weird, actually.
And speaking of weird, and speaking of, one of your experiences, let's talk about Men in Black and Loam. And people are going to go, what the hell? Well, just wait and see, you guys.
Well, this was, I don't remember exactly how many years ago it was, but I was reading a lot about, or researching, Swedish Men in Black cases, because that's something that's very, very rare. But that means that I need to look into it, because I'm sure they're out there, and they are there, of course, as you can read about in the book. So I was in a phase where I was contacting other researchers, veterans in the field, and asking them. And I got some newspaper clippings. I got some, read here, read in this book, and etc., etc. So I was very, very deep into it. And I had left my home, our home, and the apartment, and went down to the store. And on the way back, I kind of noticed that a man is walking towards me, and he's passing me, but I can also sense that he's noticing me. So I continue to walk, and I have this sense that someone is looking at me, and I stop and I turn around, and I see that he's standing on the street, on the pavement, looking up at me, with his hands hanging down. This anonymous man, he might even had a hoodie, so it felt very much like a horror movie. Okay, that's weird. So I continued to walk up through a park right outside their house. And once again, I felt, there's something going on. So I turn around, and there he stands. He's standing in the park on the little trail going through it, in the same position as the first time, and he's looking at me. This really feels like a horror movie. And I hurry home. I go inside. I lock the door. Okay, whew, that was weird. That was too creepy. So a few hours later, I'm sitting in the living room, chilling, and I see that our cats are behaving weird. They're kind of looking at something in the hallway. And you know your cat, so I feel that, okay, something is going on. So I go to the hall, and I look at the door, and I see how the door handle slowly is moving up and down, like there's someone standing outside. And I go to the people and look out, and I see the man. He's standing there trying to get inside. And here's kind of odd thing, which I don't think I mentioned, but it feels either he heard me or he sensed me that I was inside the door or behind the door. So he backs off like 1 meter or so. And I open the door because I'm crazy. And I ask him, what do you want? Or who are you looking for? And he says just one word, Luam. And I was like, no, there's no Luam here. He said it, he pronounced it like Luam. And I told him, no, there's no Luam here. And I closed the door, and he stands out there for a while longer. And this kind of sets off a month with daily visits from this man. And every time he asks for Luam. Sometimes he's standing in the stairs, above our door, looking down at our door. So, when you go and you unlock the door and you glance up, and you see he's standing there looking at you. We found him outside the balcony at night, looking up at us. One night, he rang the door, and he's asking. Of course, we got angry and opened the door, and of course he's asking for Luam. And to be honest, we saw him every day for a month. So after a while, after getting home from the office or whatever we were doing, he was standing there. So after a while, he kind of became a weird friend somehow. So he disappeared after a month or something, and we never saw him again. But it stayed with me, this thing, and I was reading Alan Greenfield's The Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts, which deals with the secret cipher in Book of the Law, Aleister Crowley's Book of the Law. And in this cipher, you can write different words. In Greenfield's example, he used old contactee names, names of aliens that George Adamski, etc., have used, and he got, different kinds of words from them. So I decided to write Luam into it. And I got these just weird dark words like shadows or soul or lurking and stuff like that. And that felt also very, very freaky. And then it's also hit me, Luam, what is Luam? So I searched for the word. It's a different spelling of something called lam, which is a specific soil, which is good for gardens. Lam is, of course, also the entity that Aleister Crowley channeled or was in contact with in a magical working he did in 1908. And that, of course, is the classic gray-like being with a large head, this alien being. So the connection, of course, in my paranoid mind was, okay, alien, grays, men in black. So that's but what I learned from it, or my insight from it, was that the concept of men in black has to do with paranoia. It has to do with reading stuff, reading. I can't put it in words, but you read more stuff into what's happening than it might be actually. Men in Black is all about paranoia, and I think that's why it's so rare in Sweden. Because for example, United States, which I feel is the home of the Men in Black, basically have a much more secrecy when it comes to the military and government, etc., etc. Sweden is way more open about this, so I can imagine how the paranoia is can grow a lot larger and stronger, and therefore kind of manifest these kind of experiences, no matter if you see it as some kind of physical beings or people or aliens or whatever it is. It's the result, I'd say, of paranoia. It's a result of those darker thoughts and experiences we have, and for some reason it's so deeply connected to the UFO lore and alien lore. Oh, I'm talking a lot here, Shannon.
No, you're great. Are you kidding me? You keep on going.
Well, I had this. Oh, I had this wild idea. Everyone out there will think I'm crazy, but Men in Black and other kinds of human-like beings in this field, could they be that they're part of the phenomenon? Let's say that the phenomenon itself wants to be seen, but it wants to stay hidden. So it kind of takes over in some kind of almost, symbolic way, or just like you know, it makes you see stuff in other people or animals or in symbols that's originally not there. But when the phenomena takes over it, you kind of get connected to the phenomena through it. It's like a proxy phenomenon, or like, for example, Men in Black is a proxy of the weirdness itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's some thoughts I had pretty recently. It's like, yeah, it wants to be seen, but it wants to stay hidden at the same time. And as you might notice, it's not entirely successful, because Men in Blacks are often very, very weird. They kind of look normal, but there's something off with them.
Was there something off about this guy?
Well, except he was contacting us, asking for Luam. For
Yeah, besides that. Besides the whole demony entity asking.
Well, he no, in his case it was more the behavior. Yeah, one can say maybe just was a guy with some kind of mental issues, of course, but it kind of fit in so good into the Men in Black research I was doing. And here's another thing: I do not know if I mentioned this in the book, but a couple of months later, there was an ordinary day, and I checked my email in the morning, and there was a letter from a British production company. They had seen a photo my partner had taken of me, and in the background of that photo, it looks like something that could be a Bigfoot or a troll. I call it a troll. It's a case of pareidolia, of course, in this case, but it looks quite cool. It looks like a being standing there with big feet and kind of lurking. And they asked me, "Can we use this in our show?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, go on. It's fine." A couple of hours later, I get another email from a Norwegian friend who sent me a couple of photos, and he asked me, "Can this be troll? Footprints from a troll?" And so he had this large footprints, which kind of looked like Bigfoot footprints, by the way. And so he was joking about this. This must be a troll who walked here. And yeah, so okay, two troll things during one day. That's nice. I like that. So later in the evening, I'm going to the store, and I walked through this park I mentioned earlier, where this Luam guy was standing, looking at me, and exactly at the spot where he was standing, exactly at the spot, there I see something. And when I go closer, this is under a lamppost, basically. When I go closer, I see that it's a wooden troll. Someone have carved a troll from wood and
What?
put it on the trail. Yeah, I know. And I look up, and I look into a window of a house nearby, and I see a big porcelain owl looking at me.
Oh boy.
So it's far fetched, I know, but
No, I love that. The
it's
synchronicities and all of that. You're going, really right now? That's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. So it all hangs together. Everything is connected somehow.
No, I love that story. And Fred, I'm still waiting to quote unquote make it. Like I'll know that I've made it or I've gotten too close to something when I, open the door and there's just weirdo standing outside and I'm like, "Oh, how can I help you? Who are you looking for?" And they say, "Captain Howdy." And I'll go, "Yes, I've made it. Thank you. About time." All right, so now pardon these questions. We can do them kind of rapid fire because they'll be very probably easy for you to answer. But a few questions about your strange friend. Was he always in the
Yeah.
same clothes?
Yes, he was in the same clothes. I would say that. Yeah, I don't remember the clothes now, but he
Yeah.
kind of looked identical each time. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't a suit though, but yeah.
But always a hoodie. Was the hoodie always pulled up?
Yeah, the hoodie was always pulled up. What I
Mm.
remember. Yeah.
What a wonderful creeper. Did you ever hear him say any other word besides Luam?
No, he only said Luam.
Wow.
That was the word.
Did he ever
So
wave or do a nod or smile at you?
no, his face were completely neutral. He didn't look happy. He didn't look angry. He didn't look, he didn't show any emotions. He just said Luam.
I love
You
this.
know?
I love this so much, Fred. You have no idea. I really, really do because it's so unique. Do you still look for him or wonder if you did see him, do you think he would look different at all? Do you think he would have aged at all?
I this was maybe a year after I think I might have seen him, and oddly enough, I saw him go into another house, and I'm not sure about this, but there was something similar with the clothes, and I felt that he's on to someone new about this now. He's still asking for Luam. I don't know about this, but if that was him, that was the only time I've seen him afterwards. What I know, I have no idea what happened to him, and still have no idea what Luam means. Is it a name? Is it something else? Believe me, I've been trying to research it. There was actually, I mentioned it on Twitter months ago, and someone wrote to me and said that he had been at some kind of paranormal event or conference or something like that, and there was researcher who I don't remember the name of now, who she did a lot of notes, stuff that came up, from some kind of channeling or some kind of paranormal session or something. And one of the words written down there was Luam. So I reached out to this person. I remember I did that, but I never got any answer because I'm very curious, is there a meaning to it except, the soil and the connection to Aleister Crowley? I don't know.
Just the fact that it gave me the creeps to see the various iterations of what this, what he could be getting at by saying this word, right? Because it loosely translates to, like you said, soil or soul or shadows or crawl. And you're going, well, my goodness, I mean, that could go either way, good or bad. I mean, I like my soul. I'd rather not give it to you. Or it could mean something very light and love. You just don't know. But for him to be always just standing outside the door. And then, by the way, most normal people don't actually try doorknobs to get into a home. So that wasn't very good. Was that only one time that you noticed him trying the doorknob?
It was the only time I noticed. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm absolutely sure he might have, done it during nights or when I wasn't home. It kind of, it feels weird. He wouldn't try, but maybe he when I reacted to it, maybe he stopped after that. I don't know. But now when you're creeping me out now, Shannon, here, with the hint of him repeating this word over and over again. To me, that's what does that mean? It kind of feels like a ritual of some kind.
It does, especially since it seemed either he just chose not to or he was incapable of saying anything else. I mean, he didn't care if you were comfortable. He didn't say, oh, hello, sir. Yes, I'm looking for Luam. Or, there was nothing normal about this. So this part of the book stuck out to me so much. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Fred has got to talk about this because this goes very closely along with some themes that I've covered on the show. And that is just these, whatever they are, or whoever they are with whatever abilities they have, if, whatever way you want to go with that seem to just walk amongst us and you'd have no idea unless they just They just are themselves, I guess, and then they stick out like a sore thumb. They just can't help themselves.
I'm actually reading a great book about this subject by Tim Schwartz called Mimics, The Others Among Us. Deeply recommended so far. It's like a collection of stories and essays on this subject. Yeah, I just wanted to mention it because it's exactly this thing. It's exactly the subject.
I'll have to link that as well in the show notes. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That is a fascinating subject right there, because that can go hand in hand with something like a classic Men in Black situation, right? So,
oh yeah, absolutely.
all right. Well, last but not least, I kind of wanted to touch on, and we've both said the word owls, so perfect, segue here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Swedish side of owls and UFOs.
Yeah, owls. What a beautiful thing. I actually, leading up to from the last time we were supposed to do this recording, and to today, I had two owl synchronicities. We did an interview with a man, a philosopher and thinker, who was talking more about the esoteric aspects of UFOs. And when entering the room where he was interviewed, I noticed that the ventilation had symbols, a golden symbol of an owl on them, which I found quite amusing. Yesterday, when I sat on the train home, there was a guy in front of me who had a big owl tattooed on the back of his head. So I had a tattooed owl looking at me all the time for like 45 minutes. So owls are constant. They're everywhere. I won't go into it. I won't go into it now. But we had a quite weird sighting a couple of years ago, a light phenomenon, and just before that, we had owls flying over us, screeching, which is something I didn't think about until maybe a couple of months ago, where I realized, yeah, that's where the owl was, and then we saw this weird light thing. Uh, so they're there, and I managed to dig up a few stories about owls in Sweden. I think personally the most spectacular one is the one about Oscar Johansson. He was a Chicago guy who, he was born in Sweden, living in Chicago, but once a year he was home in Sweden. This was 1980, during the late summer, and he was going to, I believe, their summer cabin that they had, and he was driving along the roads with his 11-year-old son sleeping in the back seat, and suddenly he sees this bright, strong blue light in front of him on the sky. And I don't remember now if it was directly afterwards or a couple of minutes afterwards. He sees a large owl flying towards him on the road. And he's driving quite fast, on these small roads. And the owl lands on the hood of the car and sits sits on the hood close to the window looking at him. And of course he's in shock, but he continues to drive. It's still going pretty fast until the owl disappears, or it flies away. uh, Moments later, he sees a strange creature on the road, kind of hovering like 1 or 2 meters above ground, with long ears, horns, looks like hooves, hairy, and is standing on two legs basically. And he thought, he wasn't a religious person, but he compared it to seeing, the devil himself standing there on the road. And I love how this experience both feels like, it's high strangeness, of course. There is something with UFOs in it, the blue light. You have obviously something either paranormal or cryptid, with this odd, I'd call him like some kind of goat man, on the road looking at him. I find it, this is a very, very fascinating case, and the guy who experienced it was, he was a, rational man, wasn't a person who just made up stories just to get attention. But it's just this kind of 3 steps, blue light, owl, and then this weird whatever it was standing on the road. And I also I mentioned another case from 1966 where 2 boys, 2 teenagers, were out bicycling, or maybe they were on mopeds, and they stop because they see an owl, a big owl, sitting on something, and when they're watching the owl, they're also noticing that there's this large flying saucer hovering in the background above the trees. And it's interesting, it's fascinating how owls and UFOs and high strangeness is so deeply connected. But I kind of feel, it's nothing original here, but I feel that the owl itself is some kind of guardian, or it's a gatekeeper. Is that the correct word here? You know, someone or something that awaits at the border to, to another realm, or to another dimension, or just a symbol that, okay, now you need to watch out because something weird is going to happen, something otherworldly. I mean, yeah, I mean, I love owls. So for me, it's fantastic that we who enjoy this subject have the owl kind of as a mascot, I'd say.
And I do wonder, Fred, because and I'll bring up why I'm even mentioning this, but for this gentleman in the car, it kind of goes along the lines of, what if there was 3 or even 4, shove another extra body in the back, all staring out the front windshield when, the second incident, the owl on the hood, quote unquote, owl on the hood landed. It makes me wonder, would all of the alert, awake people all see an owl? Or, as the case that I bring up all the time, that people are probably sick of me bringing up, is almost the exact same incident. There's an owl. I think it was in the road and they had stopped, and 3 people saw an owl and 1 person saw the classic gray alien. So it kind of goes along with the whole, well, what's really there? We're not sure.
Well, yeah, that's. I mean, his son was sleeping, so he didn't see anything. But yeah, I wonder that too. Recently, I was visiting a gentleman in the south of Sweden who had this most remarkable observation of UFO, or some kind of craft of some kind. It was huge, gigantic, flew over his house. It was red and orange and silvery, and it was like, it's a huge thing. And he told me, because he's frustrated, because it seemed like no one else saw this. His wife might have seen a little bit of it, but no neighbors, nothing around. He was calling airports, he was calling the military, and he told me, what if I was the only one who saw it? Maybe it was meant that only me could see it.
Right.
Yeah, and that gave me chills when I heard it. Bec- imagine hearing this man's voice and emotion when he talked about this, and he kind of realizes or thinks or ponders that this was just for him. This was his experience. So yeah, absolutely. What I mean, what does it mean in the case you mentioned? If two of the persons saw an owl and the third one saw a gray, what does that mean?
Right.
Yeah, and that's an eerie thought somehow. I can't really pinpoint it, but it's something spooky with it.
It is spooky, and honestly, it gets dark really fast, which you well know when we start to talk about abductees and contactees. And forgive me for asking this, but I feel like I should, and I'm not trying to make this into something that it's not, and you shut me down right away if that's the case. But, you've mentioned now sightings, owls, owl synchronicities, all of these things with owls. Does that then make you wonder if you are in fact a contactee? And maybe those are stories in the book, and that's fine. You leave it for the readers. But if not, does that make you wonder then maybe there are some things that you just don't remember?
Well, that's I've thought about it. I have absolutely. I had experiences which I more count as, what you call it, hypnagogic experiences,
Mm-hmm.
where which could kind of related to these kind of things. But I really would like to see him like that and not like something else. I don't want to call myself an experiencer or anything. I get I get pretty nervous now when I'm talking about it or when you're asking the question. It's something I've never really dived into deeper, to be honest. I've always seen myself as a quite grounded person, a rational person, and I don't know, Shannon. I don't know. I don't see myself as that. I do not. But I have a lot of synchronicities. That's all the time. I love synchronicities. I find them very rewarding, and they make me happy. They make my life more mysterious and fun. So yeah, yeah. I don't know what to answer. I don't know.
Well, I think it's best if it stays more the positive aspect. As, like I said,
Hmm.
as you well know, this stuff gets
Hmm.
really dark really quick. And then all of a sudden, you're not sleeping and you're looking over your shoulder all the time. Like, who wants that? You don't even feel
Yeah.
safe in your own home.
Hmm. No, I'm perfectly fine on the side of being a researcher and investigator and author. I'm happy that those experiences I've had. It kind of gave me a glimpse into the weirdness I'm interested in. But I don't want to go deeper down the rabbit hole. I'm happy on the outside.
Yeah, you've already had the demon seeker at the door for a month, so I think you're
Yeah.
you're good, right? Like you're good with that. That's
Yeah,
enough.
I go with that. That's fine with me.
And I hate when I do this, but last question for you is going to go back to the demon seeker. I don't know why I just called him that. That's probably bad luck to call him that, but something that I had highlighted to ask and I didn't ask. I'm sorry to everyone to jump back, but you mentioned you were heading to a park and he had been behind you, and then all of a sudden you see him in the park. Could he have gotten there naturally as a human being that quickly?
Well, I don't know. I mean, he could have. The thing is that he stayed on the same distance all the time. When I saw him on the street,
Mm.
he was standing, and when I saw him in the park, he was standing on the same distance. To be honest, I never saw him walk. I saw him standing on the street and then in the park, and between that I just I kept my eyes forward and trying to get home. So yeah, I don't know, but the weird thing was, of course, that he was standing still both times. I saw him the first time I saw him, of course, he was passing me. He was going in the opposite direction, but the other two times he was just standing. I and he was standing outside the door. He was standing outside the balcony. I no, I that's I people. No one has ever asked me these questions before. And yeah, I don't know. I kind of would like to hope that he came there the natural way by walking just the same speed as me.
You saying that he was the same distance each time, and then I'm visualizing the hoodie. This has reminded me of John Paul Capice came on. He's been on a few times on ITF, but he came on specifically to share an encounter that he had, or a sighting he had, with what he termed the best thing that the box he could put it in was a black-eyed kid. And this was like behind his
Mhm.
house. He takes his German Shepherd out every day, every night for runs and walks. And it's in this swath of woods. And at this certain distance, he sees what he thought was a teenager, young adult, hoodie up. It was a red hoodie, so we terrorize him with red hoodies now. But it was standing, or it whatever was standing against a tree, And John Paul said he instantly just got this feeling like, this is bad, I need to go. So he turns around, takes the dog, and then it ended up, or he, damn it, there I go again. The entity or he ended up now basically where he shouldn't be too quickly, essentially in front of him, but off to the side against now another tree in the same exact position. So he, again, just like you didn't see him walk, didn't see him move, and just posted up against this tree. And now John Paul's really like, oh, scheisse, I am out of here. This is not a good thing. So you saying that just like blows my mind, because I'm going, that is exactly how John Paul described what he experienced behind his house. So, I mean,
really?
So very interesting.
I'm getting goosebumps here, but or this, what do you say? The hair stands up on my arms, basically. Yeah.
This is so cool. I mean, this is what happens when you hop on. You just start like, things just get bounced around. And you're like, oh my gosh, I've heard this exact thing almost. And I mean, poor John Paul, this is right behind his house. And you as well, you had it come right up to your house too. It's like they have no sense of boundaries. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. They should learn that. They should learn to stay away.
Where are your manners, young man? I mean, really. Yes. But I mean, look, the hoodie, the whole thing, it's very similar. So who knows what that means? We don't have the answers, but it is damn fun to talk about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He told this on your show. I need to...
I can send that to you, because I would like your opinion on that.
Oh, yeah.
And then maybe there's some similarities that I am not remembering that you can go, hey, there's this too. Because that's all we can do is compare notes,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, do that. I would love to.
I absolutely will. Well, Fred, thank you so much for finally coming on. This will not be the last time, I am sure of that. And please let everyone know where to find you on all the socials that you want to give out, and of course, where to find the book.
Well, the book you can find everywhere where you buy books online. I mean, Amazon is a easy way to buy Northern Lights High Strangeness in Sweden. And if you like it, please leave a review, like everyone says, but please do. You can find me on social media, on Twitter. I think it's called X now, but Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram as Homo Satanis, where I mostly put posts about high strangeness, books, cats, and horror movies. So I'd love to connect with you there. So yeah, I'd say that's the best way to hang out with me at the moment.
Well, Fred, thank you once again, and you are welcome back any old time.
Thank you, Shannon.